Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which I'm currently on in Ottawa, Ontario, is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. As all of you are joining us today from many places near and far, I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the lands that you are tuning in from. So welcome to today's webinar on non-market housing development, a continuation of a series of sessions that were scheduled to take place at CHRA's Congress 2020 in Saskatoon this year. And I mean, on that note, we here at CHRA hope that you are all staying well. My name is Dominika Krzeminska, and I'm the Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives at the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association. I would like to thank our sponsor of today's session, Vancity. We're excited to have Irene Ganitsos, Senior Manager of Strategic Initiatives and Investment at Vancity Community Foundation, joining us for today's webinar as today's moderator. Before I pass it on to Irene, I'd like to also introduce today's speakers. So we're going to first hear from Bernadette Maidel, CEO of Homespace Society, followed by Chelsea McNeil, Director of Education, Employment, and Social Enterprise at Choices for Youth out of St. John's. And finally, from Sarah Woodgate, President of Calgary Housing Company and Director of Calgary Housing. Welcome, everyone. And Irene, I will pass it over to you.
Great. Hello, everybody. Welcome today, and thank you to CHRA for putting on this webinar and pivoting after the conference was canceled, unfortunately, in Saskatoon, which was really disappointing because I'm from Saskatoon and was really excited to be back there. So just a little bit about myself and Vancity. We are pleased to be the sponsor of this webinar on non-market housing. Vancity, together with Vancity Community Foundation is highly committed, in particular, to supporting the nonprofit and community sector to align resources and to identify ways to develop, redevelop, and grow their assets that are contributing to affordable housing needs in our communities. We do this through providing grants for planning and pre-development and financing, creative financing in partnership with CMHC for pre-development costs, and hopefully moving along to more conventional financing through the credit union. And I'm really excited today to hear from our panelists and to learn more about other models supporting nonprofit and non-market housing development in our communities. So I will pass it on to Bernadette from Homespace Society to provide us with a little information about their project.
So I'm Bernadette with Homespace Society, and we believe in a home for everyone in our community. From a mission, vision, values, as I mentioned, our vision is a home for everyone in our community. Our mission is we creatively apply our expertise to increase the number of affordable and specialized units. And I have to say, working with Homespace, one of the things I'm most proud about is our values as an organization. We really pride ourselves on operating with these values on a daily basis, dignity, innovation, and growth. So who is Homespace? So we are a charitable real estate developer, rental housing owner, and property manager. So we currently have an affordable and permanent supportive housing portfolio of more than 550 units in 27 properties in 22 communities in Calgary. We really, in terms of where we fit on this spectrum, is we exist to support some of the most vulnerable in our community, which is where our permanent supportive housing comes in. So we were originally established as Homespace in October 2016. So we just had our 4th anniversary. We were previously the Calgary Community Land Trust. Our model is that we're essentially a real estate company, and what we do is we partner with 18 social serving agencies that provide the supports to our residents. So we focus on the real estate, and our agency partners focus on the supports. We believe that we offer an innovative approach in terms of maintaining a legacy of specialized and affordable housing in Calgary. And our model is we believe on separating the landlord and the service provider. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So just to give you a sense, many of you are not in Calgary, but here's the city of Calgary and the communities that we currently have properties in. Really put this up not for those outside of Calgary, just to demonstrate that for us it's really a balance between spreading affordable housing through multiple communities in Calgary, but also, you know, really recognizing that in order to make affordable housing relevant for those that we have living with us is to make sure it's close to amenities and easily accessible. And so, you know, we're not in as many communities as we'd like to be, and as Calgary continues to expand and go further out, that's a bit, you know, a goal for us. But I think we really need the infrastructure in order to grow as an organization. So in terms of our business lines, we have two core business lines. The first one is on our new development. So we have opened 7 new buildings and currently have 3 additional projects opening within the next month. And then we've got 2 additional properties in various stages of development. We're an experienced developer of affordable housing in Calgary. And when I talk about new development, I just wanted to put a couple slides in around some of the things that we consider. So when we're looking for sites, we're very intentional around what we're looking for. Again, as I mentioned, primarily it has to work for our residents, close proximity to amenity, service, and transit. Most of our residents don't have vehicles, and walkability is critical. For one of our buildings that are 24/7 staffed on the permanent supportive housing, research and our own experience tells us that we want to target between 20 and 40 units. This number allows for maximizing the success and building community within our buildings. We also look towards community amenities, and then from a practical and logistical perspective, we make sure the zoning is in line, so we're not having to do rezoning, because really for us, we really want to bring it to market as quickly as possible. We look to the content and does it fit into the community. And the other piece, finally, we look at is the existence of other non-market housing, because we don't want to saturate a particular community with too much affordable housing. So just before I flip over to the property management side, and maybe I'll go back actually on the new development. So when we talk about new development for home space, what that means for us is that we do all of the site selection, all the development permitting. We work with the city, we work with our architects, and then we contract that out to a construction manager. So again, we're really trying to create efficiencies in the market, and so we're not a builder. And we'll hear from a builder later, which was really exciting on the panel. But from us, we're not a builder, so we want to focus on our area of expertise, which really is on the pre-development to make sure we get the type of building we're looking for, and then we hand it over to a construction manager, so some of our builders in the community. And so once a building is open, we transfer that entire building over to our property management team. So we've owned and operated property since 2008. We are engaged on an ongoing basis with our agency partners, residents, and neighbors. Our buildings we own in perpetuity, dedicated towards affordable housing and helping the most vulnerable. One of the things that we're very proud of is that we've got a fully capitalized replacement reserve to ensure the ongoing quality of our buildings. You know, I know this is for any affordable housing providers out there, it's one of the biggest challenges is making sure the buildings are quality housing. And I can tell you with some of our work and some of our buildings with complex folks, it is an ongoing challenge for us to make sure we maintain the quality. We're permanent housing, so even if we talk about the supportive piece on 24/7 staff buildings, our housing is permanent with no length of stay requirements for any of our residents. Some of the programs that are offered in our buildings really are trying to move residents to a different outcome, whether it be, near market housing or market housing, but there's no programs that require departing our building. So we partner with agencies who support our residents. We focus on the real estate as while they focus on supports. So the reason why this works so well for us is that the separation of duties allow us to really focus on what we do best, but we're trying to maximize the outcome to our residents. The other thing that's kind of interesting is, when we work with our agencies, we do a lot of good cop, bad cop. So sometimes if agencies struggling with a resident, it allows them to try to, have us intervene and say, you've got to work with the agency to help them stay engaged. And quite honestly, on the other side too, we get that is that we get the agency trying to support us. So it's really a really interesting partnership in order to, with both of us working together to really focus on the outcome for our residents. Because as I mentioned, some of our residents are quite complex. And then once we're open, even though the agencies are really the ones supporting our building, we are there. Like, we know that we own the properties, and our reputation is critical in community. So anytime there's any concerns with neighbors, community associations, or anything like that, like, we're at the table with our agencies from day one. And in fact, a lot of times we lead that process to make sure that that the agencies are fully supported on that side as well. And the other piece that really supports our model is around, it gives us the flexibility to pivot to what's going on in community. So, because we're kind of agnostic in terms of agency, we're open to working with any agency that needs affordable housing. It really gives us the ability to be responsive in community. So if there's a need for family housing, we'll work towards that. Complex, singles, women, and kind of everything in between. So it really allows us to be flexible and respond to the changing need of community. So as we continue to grow as a city and the needs change and the economy change, it allows us to be able to be flexible on who we partner with and not have to focus on any one population. So one of the key areas that we specialize in as an organization is on the permanent supportive housing side. So what this means to us is that it's studio apartments. There's some specialized design elements that are really targeted towards complex residents. So many of our residents would have mental health and addictions that they're currently struggling with. We have a careful selection of residents in order to maintain the balance within our properties. One of the other things is we do have short-term lease agreements. So even though the housing is permanent, our lease agreements are 3 months. And the reason we do that is not to create any additional stress for residents that their housing may be in jeopardy, but it's really to stay engaged with our residents to ensure that their unit is staying healthy and those pieces. And then one of the other things is we have a very strict residential tenancy act here. So it is very challenging to evict residents. So if we get to a place where tenancy changes need to be made, having those short-term lease agreements help us to either move them to a different property easier or whatever that looks like at the end. Fit with the residents already living in the building and in the community is really important for us as we make any residency changes. So on continuing on the permanent supportive housing side, so in the last 6 years, we've opened 7 new buildings throughout Calgary, and we have 3 more under construction on the permanent supportive housing. As I mentioned, they're not shelters or transitional housing, and there's no length of stay limitations. They're largely harm reduction, so there will likely be some active use of some sort within our buildings. The one thing I just wanted to talk about from a new development perspective is that we're very intentional on some of the design elements to increase resident integration, but also to maintain the quality of housing. So from the resident piece, we've got common areas on most floors. So we've got a large kitchen area, usually a large rec room, and then we've got the common areas in every floor vary for their use. Some is yoga studios, smudging rooms, and kind of computer labs and everything in between. It really allows the agency to have various common spaces targeted towards their programming. We've got built-in office space for the agency that's supporting, especially for 24/7 staff. So on the other side, some of the design elements that we've put into place that address some of the challenges or the complexities of our residents is that we've got multiple floor drains so that we avoid flooding. We've got reinforced drywall. One of the more unique things is that we've got a stovetop that has to be turned on manually, and then if there's no movement in front of the cooktop over a period of time, then it'll shut off automatically, so that if somebody leaves the unit or falls asleep or something like that, it really goes a long way on the fire prevention. All these buildings on the permanent supportive housing side are fully sprinkled and also have elevators, because we do know that when it comes to our vulnerable residents, they often have mobility challenges as well. So really for us, we really and truly believe that our success is through our partnership. So we have been fortunate as a partner in the Resolve campaign. And so for those of you who don't know, the Resolve campaign was a campaign that really solicited private sector donations to support capital construction for affordable housing in Calgary. For us, we partnered with 11 different home builders that stepped up, and each builder took on the construction management of one of our properties. And the real business case around the Resolve campaign was that it's not only the right thing to do, but we also highlighted the economic results of housing people, which I'll get to a little bit later. So we've had a really strong success of private donors in Calgary, which has been critical, allowing us to increase our portfolio. And then, as I mentioned, one of the key partners for us is the agency. You know, we believe so strongly in the work that they do and the way they support our residents. So that's one of the other keys. And then, as we talk about partnerships, you know, one of the key pieces for us is City of Calgary. So we're very fortunate, and Sarah's here, and she'll talk about some of the work that the city does. But from a nonprofit, we're successful in large part because of the City of Calgary. The city launched a nonprofit land transfer a couple years ago, where a portfolio of city-owned land was made available at book value to the nonprofit. So our 3 buildings that are opening in the next month are all because of city land. There's also a housing incentive program, but probably one of the most critical things in terms of contributing to the stock is that the city gave us expedited development approvals. So as we go in through a development permit, there's a team of people within the city who are targeted towards the affordable housing files. So not only ours, but other housing providers within the city. And so really being able to get a development permit on an expedited basis allows us to get in the ground and produce housing much quicker. And that also allows us to free up capital and maximize kind of our impact on the new construction side. Over the years, we've also been we've been lucky enough to have significant capital grants through the province, and these are for any folks who've been around a while. A lot of these were around the Affordable Housing Initiative, so the AHI stuff that came out in partnership provincially and federally. And then on the programming side, because we deal with some of the more vulnerable, complex folks, many of our buildings are program funded through the province. We also work with Government of Canada. We've been fortunate enough to be successful in some co-investment applications, rental insurance, and then on the seed funding side. So just to give you a sense of some of the product that we are producing. So these are some of our recently opened buildings. We've got 30 units. It gives you a sense of what the office looks like. The office is really targeted towards being right there when folks come in, so for our guest management perspective, as well as being able to identify if residents might need some help or be in any kind of distress. And then just as some examples of some of the units that we have in the buildings. And then these are our 3 that we're super excited about that I mentioned that are on city land. So one of them is downtown. It's our largest built to date, 74 units built by Canada, and as well as supported by a local private donor. We have 27 units opening in Hillhurst, one of the communities just outside of downtown, and then another 38 units. The 38 unit one we're very excited about. It's one of our first youth buildings. So right now we have focused mostly on adults, but this one we'll be moving into the youth space. So we're pretty excited about that. And then we've got 2 sites under development. So one is Beltline, another 51 units that we'll be adding, opening in the spring. And then our newest partnership with the city that is currently just a blank space of land that we'll be starting on hopefully early next year. So these are some of the things that we're focused on as we move forward in terms of mid-rise, youth permanent supportive housing, and some family permanent supportive housing. So from our perspective, our factors for success is really, we're able to successfully be the owner and developer of these projects. Our partnership with government and funders. By having the design and construction management services contracted out, it allows us to have kind of a minimal development team and be really efficient and lean as an organization. Our social service supports are critical and partnered with the experts who can deliver those most effectively. And really for us, the fit into the community and being good neighbors is really important to us. And so I think that really comes across as we operate our buildings. And then collaboration with existing community associations and being really present with our buildings. And for us, we are committed to the work we do, but really, when we're trying to talk about business cases and stuff like this, there is very strong economic reasons why we do our work. This is from 2018, so it's now coming up a couple years old, but we saw with the folks that we housed an average savings of $34,000 per household per year, or a 41% decrease the use of public systems. And these are some of the ones we talk about. So days hospitalized, EMS, police, emergency room visits, stays in jails, court appearances. And for us in Alberta, this is a really important piece because we're really struggling economically right now. And so, it's not only the right thing to do and to not have people living on the streets, but it really does have a significant impact to our economy. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Bernadette. That was fantastic. And people, if you want to start adding your questions to the question chat, please go ahead, but we will do questions at the end of the session. And now let's move on to Chelsea from Choices for Youth.
Hi there, folks. Great. So happy to be on this panel and really pleased to be able to talk to you about some really exciting projects that we've been doing here in St. John's, Newfoundland at Choices for Youth. And yeah, so I'm just going to dig in. Choices for Youth is certainly, it's a fairly large youth services agency here in St. John's, Newfoundland, and we exist because we feel that young people have potential. We feel that all young people have potential, and there has, along the pathway to emerging adulthood, sometimes things get in the way. And so in terms of choices for youth, we want to focus in on what that potential is and help wrap supports around those interventions. Now, I'm just having a little hiccup getting my PowerPoint to move. There we go. So as you can see with the screen, we really feel that, as our big kind of ambition statement, that together we can end homelessness. And we feel very strongly that we can do that. We can do that through a multitude of interventions and through some innovative programming. So Choices for Youth is a charitable organization that's been around for almost 30 years. We've learned a bit along the way. Our focus initially was in housing and providing supportive housing for young people who 16 to 29 who've experienced instability in terms of their housing, or who have found themselves homeless. Initially, we started in our services 30 years ago in housing, but really, that it was really iterative, I guess, growth, because the big part is recognizing, what causes homelessness. What is homelessness actually more of a symptom of a lot of other things? And I would say, for certainly you folks on the call, that probably resonates with a lot of the work that you do if you're in kind of the service, in human services. And so, core to our mandate certainly is housing first, with a housing philosophy, but we also look at health interventions as being a key component of what it means to maintain housing, what it means to, unfortunately, health is often can be a reason why you lose housing, mental health, addictions, and family breakdown. So in those kind of 3 areas, we see those things being really kind of interrelated, particularly kind of on, either ends of the continuum. However, new to the sort of the 4 areas that we focus on is employment. And I say new, I mean within the last 8 years, we recognize that employment and the barriers to employment are really one of the key components to maintaining housing. Money in your pocket allows for you to pay for your housing. Money in your pocket allows for you to be able to take care of your family. It can sometimes alleviate some of the stressors in your life, and you can see a path forward. And so with that recognition over the last 8 years, we've developed a gamut of programs, but mostly businesses, in order to break down those barriers to employment and provide opportunities for young people to learn and try in a safe and supportive environment, all with the intention of accessing and maintaining housing. But we know that all of the things required to do that are integrated in nature, and often, unfortunately, if the people are negatively impacted, is because those issues often compound. Sorry, I'm just struggling to get, there we go. Sorry, gang, I'm trying to get this to move. There we go. So these are our program areas in employment, and I'm going to be chatting with you kind of, I guess, where some of our programs kind of connect, our housing and our employment. And in terms of our employment areas, we really see, it's that there's a couple different requirements to be able to have employment opportunities or education opportunities for young people to maintain that housing. And really the core of that is a supportive environment. So we have created in our employment division kind of 3 key areas. Education and skills that prioritizes personal development and growth and choice, coupled with individualized supports to meet basic needs, build confidence, and assist in the design of the self-determined futures. And then thirdly is our social enterprise, our portfolio of social enterprises, where we seek to promote an opportunity to try employment to develop skills, but then to also do that with choice and thinking of it always as moving on towards the next thing. So transitional in nature, but certainly supportive. So in terms of our social enterprise portfolio, we run 3 social enterprises that are created with experiential learning techniques. We have Impact Instruction, which is our flagship social enterprise. We have The Shop, which is a small-scale production facility that manufactures small, more creative-based projects for our own product lines, but then also fulfills production contracts for SMEs in our community. And thirdly, Neighborhood, which is our clothing store, and it's situated in the east end of St. John's, right in smack dab in the middle of a really fantastic and vibrant neighborhood, and has really kind of become a center, locally owned fixture in that particular community. All 3 of these social enterprises seek to employ young people, provide some skilled instruction and certifications in learning, but most importantly, provide much needed employment to young people in our communities who are looking to develop and hone skills. But most importantly, we do that with individualized supports, because we all know that the reason why a young person perhaps doesn't maintain a job or can't access a job has got to do with all the reasons that people assume that they can't hold a job or attain a job. You know, they're lazy, they don't want to do these things. Like, we all know that kind of I suppose that sort of judgmental way of thinking is not actually true. For a lot of the young people that connect with us, you know, the reason they don't have a resume isn't because they don't know how to type one up. It's because there are tons of barriers that prevent them from accessing employment, from current systems inequity to systemic racism, to access to benefits through income support systems, through intergenerational poverty, trauma, transportation, housing. I mean, the list goes on. So those individualized supports are designed to help mitigate some of those issues, to support the young person to be able to choose the path that they so desire. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about Impact Instruction and its evolution. Impact Instruction has been around for 9 years. It evolved from a program which was intended on increased apprenticeship, sort of, I guess, in the boom here in Newfoundland for trades-based learning. About 9 years ago, when we had quite a labor shortage mixed with some fairly substantial oil projects. We trained quite a few young people through that program that moved on to do all kinds of really interesting things in the trades and have successful careers. And one of the things that we noticed was that the primary intervention that we did was not actually employment related; they were mostly health related. And so for that program, when that program kind of came to a screeching halt through funding sources and the like, we said, well, this program is far too important to let go. So how might we continue this? And so as it transferred from a program into social enterprise, which is Impact Instruction, over the last 7 years, we've seen enormous amount of growth in what that business can do and the amount of employment that we can provide for young people. Impact Instruction right now, in terms of its organizational structure, has a general manager, a foreman, and 4 mentors or skilled carpenters, who then have teams of young people who they teach. Those skilled mentors teach on the job in order to do small-scale construction to some degree, property maintenance, and then also demolition remediation and new housing builds. And so if you can imagine, if thinking about all those kind of target areas in terms of business lines, one they're more evolutionary in nature. So a young person comes in and doesn't know how to read a tape measure, and they enter into impact construction, that they work in close proximity to a mentor, they're learning from the mentor, from one another, a combination of in-class learning, as well as looking at outside certifications. And then we build those skills through the projects. And building our own affordable housing gives us a really good platform to be able to teach kind of really broad range of skills in the construction and trades. So here's some examples of some of the projects that we've built over the number of years. The building you're looking at is the LILLY building, which is congregate housing in downtown St. John's. And as you can see, is a heritage building that was decrepit, and Hair Choice Trees like to buy decrepit buildings and fix them up. And so this is a really important kind of fixture in the downtown community. So it was really where we kind of cut our chops on like understanding what it would mean to extend or maximize value in a housing build with employment wrapped around it. So we were able to, on that particular project, we partnered with a general contractor, and we made it a stipulation of the contract that they had to work with impact construction and teach young people, or else they wouldn't get the contract. So through that project, we were able to employ 10 youth and create over 15,000 hours in youth employment. And as I said before, one of our the most significant intervention or suite of interventions that we made throughout that duration of that particular project was actually in health, and those particularly mental health and addiction supports. Our next build for Choices for Youth as impact construction was Southside Road. If you've ever been to St. John's, you know St. John's is built into rock. There's a reason why they call it the rock. And Southside Road and building Southside Road was no exception. This is a piece of property that was given to us by our housing corporation, and they supported us in terms of the seed capital to build Southside Road, which is 5 units of affordable supportive housing maintained by our supportive housing programs. And we built it from the ground up. And it is embedded, if you can imagine, into a rock hillside. So we learned a lot on this particular project. And even though it's built into a rock face, it is totally accessible. And so we did learn quite a bit on making a property that would naturally, given the landscape, would be inaccessible, doing all we can to create accessibility. And this particular building has been housing young people for the past 5 years, and was a really great project for us to determine what it would mean to start a project from the ground up, build a house from the ground up to spec for our client, which was actually an internal program, but also really refining and defining our skills as a housing builder. The last project, the project I'm going to spend a little bit more time on, is Cashin Avenue, which is a project that we're just actually finishing up now. We, in our neighborhood of our social enterprise hub and employment center, there's this kind of iconic property in the neighborhood that was fairly decrepit in nature. It was, from the neighborhood's perspective, it was a building that just needed to come down. So we decided that the footprint was such that it would make really good affordable housing given its location. It's on a bus route, it's close to amenities, and it's in a really interesting neighborhood that offers a lot of, I think, neighborhood-based support. So what we did some scoping of, okay, if we bought this property and renovated it, what would be required from a financing perspective? We know we're good at building, so we kind of have that one on lock. But thirdly, what kind of housing? Is it just affordable market housing? Is it going to be housing for young people? So how does this fit into our mandate? And so after doing some of that initial design work and scoping work, we know that there's a fairly acute need for affordable housing for pregnant and parenting moms. We have a peer support program called Mama Moments that is really front and center of a lot of that work. And they made it known that, there's not a lot in the 2-bedroom apartment space that is affordable for a single income family. And so we said, that's a perfect population for this particular project, given its location, proximity to schools, and the fact that we have a supportive program that will be able to provide required supports when necessary. And so we purchased the property with the support of an impact investor out of Montreal for lower than market mortgage rates, amortized over 10 years. And we were able to knock the building down, and with the help of the city of St. John's, be able to design a footprint that made sense from a zoning perspective. And we built 5 units of affordable housing for pregnant and parenting moms in our community. So in terms of this project, we were able to employ over 20 youth. We had 2 on-site youth mentors that we hired full-time. We created well over 5,000 hours of youth employment. We're able to generate 12 different certificate training programs for each of those 20 youth. And wrapped up in the program was really all of that sort of essential skills training or that personal growth training. They're able to take those young people through attending to themselves and attending themselves in a way of setting goals and prioritizing what it means to be happy and healthy in their community and at work. We really feel like this particular model, we really feel like we've through our experience that this model is replicatable, and it's also replicatable in ways that maybe we didn't even recognize before. We're able to access capital and build and hire young people and skilled staff to build this housing, which means that the value for young people doesn't just start the day they move in. It means the value for young people start the moment we hire them to become part of the building process. What it means is though that we have to be very careful about choosing the projects we choose. We know that our skill really is in the smaller units of housing, not necessarily large commercial builds. And we know that for young people, that the location matters so much in terms of proximity to existing supports, but then also transportation and amenities. In St. John's proper, we really see there's an awful opportunity for the purchase and development of affordable housing, in a variety of different neighborhoods. And, we really feel like impact construction can make a dent not only in, the lives of young people, but also in the marketplace in terms of affordable housing. When we look to kind of connect the dots, we see that there is a real solid opportunity for maximizing value and maximizing the value of investments. So if we're able to generate a substantial amount of youth employment, which means that young people are also are employed and learning and growing and changing and accessing potentially competitive employment or post-secondary as an outcome, then if we can do that from the ground up, we're building value, not just within the asset in which we're building, not just in, what that asset will mean over time, but also there's some systems-based savings as it relates to income support or, some of the things that Bernadette talked about around those outcomes of when a person is stable and stably housed and potentially has a bit more financial stability. What does that mean in terms of their quality of life? And some of the things that challenges a lot of the young people in which we serve. Is there a reduction in those things? And what we found is that in terms of a social return on investment, we're actually able to see over a dollar return on a dollar spent, which is pretty exciting. You know, we have quite a substantial ambition here to say, imagine if we were able to create more nonprofit owned housing to be able to disrupt that marketplace to fit the needs of the folks who live there. What does it mean for a nonprofit to own a substantial amount of housing, and what does that mean in terms of the community that evolves and grows around it? And we really, you know, try and prioritize that ambition to say that we want communities and neighborhoods that are great for young people to live, grow, and thrive in. And we see this as a really compelling mechanism to be able to do that. And thanks very much. My contact information is there. All the photos you saw of the work being done, those were all on Kitchen Avenue. If you can imagine, we demolished it to the foundation and built it. And any questions or comments or anything you would like to follow up, just don't be afraid to shoot me a line.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. That was really interesting, and I look forward to some of the questions. And now we'll move on to our final presenter, Sarah from Calgary Housing.
Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to be here today to talk about, it was a really good segue from Chelsea, because I'm talking about how to scale up nonprofit providers, how to grow them. And so I'm really excited today to talk about a piece of work that we've been dedicated towards that really started to emerge in 2015. In terms of background, I have, my name is Sarah Woodgate, and I have a dual role as both the president of Calgary Housing Company, which is the largest affordable housing and landlord in Calgary. We provide homes to 25,000 Calgarians. It's a wholly owned nonprofit organization overseen by a board of directors. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of the city. And I also am responsible as director of Calgary Housing, which is a business unit in the city of Calgary, for facilitating affordable housing programs on behalf of the city. And so it's kind of a unique role where I have the opportunity to live the world of being a nonprofit housing provider, as well as supporting citywide initiatives. And so today I'm focused on the citywide initiative portion of the role. And I'm really excited to talk about a unique partnership. We created a new affordable housing strategy in 2015 as a city of Calgary. And one of the goals of that strategy was, how do we create, I would say citizen-centric, but it would be customer-centric. How do we support the nonprofits with them at the center, and understand the barriers that they have to grow and expand and add new nonprofits, and really create a nonprofit friendly environment so that we can have a better, more holistic, robust supply of non-market housing. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today, as it specifically relates to a partnership that has led to a pilot with Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. And so in terms of context, I think when it comes to housing strategy, it's great to look at best practices and then understand the local context, because the market in every city is very different, in every municipality in Canada. And I was really pleased to see quite a few people attending today from municipalities across Canada. So just speaking briefly about the context in Calgary, is that many of you know we're a boom-bust city that aligns with the oil and gas sector. And actually, we've had our booms often counter-cyclical to investment in housing programs across Canada. So we have 50% of the rental market supply compared to major cities. This is because the MERB program, when it was really growing, the multi-residential program, we were not really growing. And same for non-market housing supply. So we actually only have just over 3% of the total housing supply in Calgary in 2015 was non-market housing. And I know across Canada, this is an issue in terms of the non-market housing supply. However, in 2015, for big cities, the average was 6%. So at the time we said we need to double the non-market housing supply in Calgary just to be average with other big cities in Canada. We have a population of 1.3 million people, and we also have aging affordable housing assets. So that 3% that we have of non-market housing supply today is aging, and it's going to need some significant repair to double the life cycle of homes or regeneration, in addition to a supply gap. And then the other thing is, similar to most places in Canada, is the supply gap grows as the housing supply continues to grow. For the last 5 civic censuses, we have had about an 18% gap of Calgary households with incomes that aren't high enough to afford housing in the private sector. We're really lucky, though, in Calgary in that we have a really strong private housing sector who meets the needs of housing for the predominant portion of the population. So average income households in Calgary are not experiencing financial distress to purchase homes. We have relative affordability. Only 4% of households earning over $80,000 a year are overspending. So our municipal efforts are really focused on low and moderate income households, and that would be households earning under $65,000 a year. And because we have a shortage of rental housing, there's quite a bit of room there to have mixed market housing, where you can have social enterprises that can have some housing provision without operating subsidies. And so we have a really unique market there for that. As we are growing, we continue to fall behind on households that are low and moderate income. We anticipate that there's 100,000 households that will be in need of supply by 2025. We have about 88,000 households in 2015. So this represents a growing shortage of about 1,700 units per year. So the city said, what are we going to do about that? And that's the next slide, is this concept of scaling up the nonprofit sector. When I first came from Ontario to Alberta in 2000, the federal government was starting to come out with some new housing programs. And at the time, we surveyed the nonprofits that existed. And because there hadn't been investment in affordable housing for a couple of decades, the nonprofits did not have development capacity. So when we did the survey, they didn't have the ability to finance boards with development expertise and staff with development expertise. So at that point in time, the city started initiating development in order to take advantage of federal programs. And I'm really pleased to say a lot has changed since that time. Bernadette talked about the Resolve campaign, and we also had a plan to end homelessness. Those two strategies really changed the landscape and the capacity of our nonprofit sector. We have about 85 nonprofit providers of affordable housing in Calgary, and many of them only operate one building, and that's fine. However, we also have nonprofits who have development expertise today and the ability to grow. And so that's our focus. Our focus is on, if we thought about small business, mom and pop shops, and how the business world has evolved, how do we create an environment where we can have bigger nonprofits where they can take advantage of economies of scale, their administrative overhead. And the goal of this program is to not shuffle deck chairs around. Focus on forced consolidation, focus on moving housing operated from one provider to another, because that doesn't grow the housing supply. So we said, how can we facilitate? Some of those opportunities might happen through nonprofits working together, but how do we actually grow the nonprofit housing supply? The City of Calgary managed housing represents 50% of the current stock. How do we change the landscape so that long-term we have a different narrative in Calgary? And that's what our focus has been. So in Calgary, there's a huge support from citizens for affordable housing. We have a regular strategy called the Citizen Satisfaction Survey. And every year, citizens are asked how they feel about municipal services. For many years in a row, affordable housing has been identified as a top priority for the City of Calgary for citizens. And even recently, with our very significant economic decline, citizens have said they would like to see more investment of tax dollars in affordable housing than any other service, except for from time to time transportation. So this is very interesting, and it's something that definitely influences decision making in terms of citizens saying housing for low income households is an issue, and it provides municipal support. However, in Alberta, our focus and our levers is different than other provinces like Ontario. And so what we're focusing on is not grants, we don't have funding from the property tax base going to operations and grants. But what City Council has agreed is that we can leverage city-owned land at our book value and vend in the difference between book value and market value, basically in lieu of a grant. And then we can also look at other barriers for the nonprofits, including the development fees. We have a grant towards offsetting development fees and expedited approvals. And Bernadette talked about expedited approvals. For a while, it was taking a long time to get through application process. And partially from the benefit of having more sophisticated nonprofits who have development expertise, we are able to go through land use development permit, building permit in less than 6 months, and sometimes much less than that. And so what we're doing is we're packaging those up as a contribution from the municipality to support the scaling up of nonprofits. And the focus of that is also on not land leases. We're really focused on helping the nonprofits have equity. When we surveyed them, access to land was a significant barrier. And also, they, if they have more assets in their ownership, they can leverage that through financing. And so that is our focus for the City of Calgary on this program. Now, we all know how complicated it is to create an affordable housing project. And when I have on the slide all the different pieces of the puzzle. So we're a nonprofit. We want to do an affordable housing development. We have multiple barriers. We're going to go to the federal government for funding and apply based on their funding criteria. We're probably going to approach the province for operating funding, maybe capital funding, and then we're going to approach the municipality. And so it's a very complicated process, and often governments have different criteria for affordability, for rent setting. And then on top of that, the development process is very complex and it's high risk. So what we're trying to do is remove the risk for the nonprofits, create more certainty, and make a wraparound package for them that makes it a lot easier to get building affordable housing. So this is a really large puzzle that we're deconstructing, saying, how do we remove the layers of barriers for nonprofits and make it easier for them to do what they want to do, and that is provide affordable housing. And so that's what the nonprofit land sale process is about. We have been through two land sale offerings. And the first one was a pilot with CMHC, where they provided seed funding for the sites that were offered. And in addition to that, we reviewed the applications together as a team through a confidentiality agreement. So individuals bidding on a site would be able to have application for CMHC seed funding, as well as apply for their financing for their programs, and then also work with the city. And so that has brought great benefits to us as an organization. And so after the first land sale, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about some examples of successes, the City Council saw the benefits of that program, and they approved a non-market housing land disposition policy. And what that is a goal to have a predictable supply of housing. One of the challenges for nonprofits and anyone in land development is when you start scaling up, you need a consistent volume of housing. And our goal would be to continue to grow that volume of housing. Now, the city only has so much land, and of course, this program is dependent on having land available. The commitment, though, is up to 10 parcels sold at below market value every 2 years to nonprofits. We source our sites through a GIS system, which was based on a survey of housing preferences, and it gets updated from time to time. What are the location criteria for housing preferences for affordable housing? And so we're able to select sites based on that criteria and then offer a land sale. And the goal is to do that on a 2-year basis. This helps to create an open bid process that's transparent, and the sale price is fixed. It's our cost, the cost associated with that land. And then we focus on eligibility criteria that's weighted as it meets public interest. The weighting, there's a higher weight. Where our goal is for a long-term commitment for affordable housing, and we're not focused on land banking. So this is really for nonprofits who are ready to develop and trying to put that puzzle together, and land is a piece of that puzzle. So that's in general, how it fits together. So what does it look like? We are really excited in the second round that we were able to have one single application for both the municipal government and the federal government, which also included co-investment funds, which were potentially included with this package. However, each entity, each government was responsible for reviewing the application and making a decision based on their own programs. So the City of Calgary is focused on bringing in land at below market value, offering those expedited planning approvals, and time is money, and reducing risks for the nonprofits. And also the local component of financial contribution for a grant that we have for seed matching, seed funding to CMHC program, pre-development grants, and also city fee rebates to help reduce the costs for the nonprofit. And then Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation for this pilot has offered the seed funding, co-investment funds, pending eligibility and assessment of the project itself. And the other benefit is that we have been able to leverage and combine the expertise of both governments. And so in the past, before this program, pre-2016, the way that land was approached was a nonprofit would want to develop. They tried to figure out the land the city owns and whether something might be surplus. They approached the city, multiple city departments, and asked them, can we use this piece of land? Mostly it was ad hoc. And it was a very unpredictable, time-consuming, not very transparent process. These type of applications would take years. I still have a few that haven't moved forward, and it doesn't have a transparent process to know for nonprofits to know what's available and be able to assess applications. So what we've been able to do is really create more transparency for the nonprofit, and also they don't need to call the planning department, the land department, and the housing department with an idea and try to find a piece of land. We're offering it out on a consistent basis rather than having those one-off initiatives. And then in terms of vetting, we can leverage the skills and knowledge of both governments. So CMHC brings the financial expertise to vet the application, and the City of Calgary has a strong understanding of the political development environment and the land use planning process, just as examples. So we're able to do that as one. And I'm pleased to highlight some of the results of the first land sale pilot that was in 2017. We offered 6 sites, which resulted in 166 new units, surveying unique populations. The other exciting thing about this program is that we have strong collaboration with nonprofits as a result of the Resolve campaign and the plan to end homelessness. And as a community, we're really focused on leveraging the skills and assets of the nonprofits with less competition to ensure that we have a strong housing system. And so this particular land sale resulted in these projects and our first time ever affordable housing agreements. A key component of this is that the City of Calgary is now under new authorities of the Municipal Government Act, able to have housing agreements on title to ensure the housing benefit. the public benefit is maintained over the life of the agreement. And this is really helpful to remove and reduce the role required of government in enabling the nonprofits to develop, have access to land, ensure that there's ability to finance that land, but have some consideration that the public benefit will be met. So we had to create new agreements that we'd never created before, go through land use, development permit process, offer the sale, close the sale. And all of these developments, Bernadette identified 3 that are opening this year, and the others are opened. This has brought leverage into our city in terms of investment. And so with the city contribution of $6.4 million, it resulted in $22 million of public investment from federal and provincial governments, as well as $8 million of philanthropic and corporate investment. And I want to highlight also the strong partnerships we have with the private sector. The private sector is a key partner in the construction of most affordable housing in Calgary. And this initiative wouldn't be possible without that strong partnership. Next slide. So here's a couple of examples, some photos of what resulted in the phase 1. Habitat for Humanity, who is well known across Canada, is a very strong partner in Calgary. They purchased 2 sites on parcels of land that were originally purchased by the city for road widenings that didn't happen. And the city owns quite a bit of land along that road widening. We identified some sites specifically for affordable housing, and the remainder of the sites will be sold by the city for revenue and return, so that we have a fund that funds future land purchases for the city. Habitat for Humanity was able to develop family-oriented housing in a great location along close proximity to rapid transit. When the site was sold, though, Habitat indicated they weren't sure, because it was along this busy corridor, what the demand for the property would be. So we helped work with them on staggering the land sales. Interestingly enough, I'm an urban planner, and one of the things that we've really seen from this development is it has improved the area, it's improved the community, and helps create a more less risky environment for the sale of the other properties of land. So we're seeing revitalization as a result of this partnership. When we talk about improving the housing system, we do work within the sector to try to have opportunities for people in housing to move through the system. And so Calgary Housing Company, for example, about 25% of new owners in Habitat for Humanity, most of their recent developments were previously tenants from Calgary Housing Company. And we have a strong partnership where we're working on attainable home ownership options to support people to achieve their housing goals. And so Habitat for Humanity on the home ownership end of this was able to leverage the nonprofit land transfer program. We are also able to address other areas where we have shortfalls. The Homes for Hero project is really exciting. This is a new charity that has a number of developments now planned in other areas of Canada. And their focus is on affordable homes for veterans. This is a tiny home project. It was completed in partnership with ATCO, and the operator was a local operator who is the Mustard Seed. And so fabulous partnership on surplus city-owned land that had some duplexes in them. But now we have more people housed in a really unique, innovative environment that has also brought a new housing provider, housing option that wasn't in existence in Calgary before the nonprofit land sale. And then the other sites that were identified, Bernadette has highlighted the home space, which will be partnering with a variety of agencies to continue to address gaps in our housing system. So in terms of what this looks like for our land sale number 2, we released this during the beginning of the pandemic and the shutdown. And so it's been a little bit delayed, but actually very, very limited delay. So we released 5 sites for phase 2, and that's the first land sale release since the new policy was approved. That takes about 3 months where the nonprofits are able to make applications. And then we have a corporate approval. That took a little bit longer this time, and that's partly related to the pandemic. But this is where the application process happens and the review happens by both the City of Calgary and CMHC. And then once the sites are awarded, and Bernadette mentioned the Seaton, the family housing site in Calgary, once they're awarded, we're able to move through the land use change and development process. And so this could be for a variety of range, but I think it's quite quick compared to other regional jurisdictions. And that's through our expedited development approval process. So when we look at this over a time duration of about release of lands every other year, in 1 year, we're finding sites internally, preparing them, and then releasing them. And then in the next year, we're working with the nonprofits on the development. And so basically every 2 years, we can have several hundred units developed. And this is only the beginning in terms of if we can scale up the nonprofits more and more, then we can start to have a sector that has the capacity to be able to address that big number. And so the goal is saying, how can we continue to scale up the nonprofit sector to have more ability to catch up with that falling behind scenario that we seem to be finding ourselves in. We've been involved in tracking the number of affordable housing units in Calgary, and we're about to release the progress since 2016. We've supported 3,000 new non-market housing units since 2016. About half of them have been developed and open, and the other half are underway. And so we're not catching up to that 1,700 units a year, but we are making a lot of progress in reducing the barriers that exist and trying to get as much as we can by working together in terms of capacity building as a sector. And so really excited about the progress so far, and I'm interested in ideas from others in terms of this is a specific pilot for Calgary with CMHC. And I think that there's a lot of ideas that can happen around this concept of focusing on a nonprofit-centric coordinated approach across governments to make it happen. So if you're interested in the non-market housing land sale or really specific information on that, I have Janet McCubbin. She is in the real estate team and is an affordable housing role that sits in our real estate department and has been actively involved in the application. So if you're interested in that piece, and of course, I'm here to answer questions now, and this is my contact information if you have broader questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. That was that's an amazing program. Really interesting to hear about it. So I guess we have 10 minutes left, or just over 10 minutes left. I can just, we have a few questions that I'll just pose to the panelists. And then if there are other questions that aren't addressed, CHRA has indicated that they would share those questions with the appropriate panelist and provide those responses. Is there anything else that I should be highlighting at this point?
That sounds perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, so thank you all three of you for amazing presentations. It's so interesting to see what's going on out there and how people are working differently to address needs for affordable housing in their community and exploring ways to add value through activities such as social enterprise. So first, there are a couple questions for Bernadette. Regarding, they're quite similar regarding partnerships and your process for selecting a private partner. So in particular, what is your process to select a private partner, including builders? And do you use an RFP process? How do you go about identifying those partnerships or selecting partners?
Yeah, sure. When it came to the builders, it was fairly unique so that we had 11 home builders step up through the Resolve campaign. And so what we did is we actually gave each builder their own building. So they did the construction management, they named the building and that process. So from when it came to the Resolve campaign and specific builder donors, that one was fairly easy for us. And then what we did is that for other Resolve projects that were not led by a builder donor, we actually just went out to market and out to the general Calgary market with some builders, especially for our downtown building, which was a new one for us on the concrete side. So we typically try to go to market. And then on the agency side, it's really a product of having a look at the space with partners, either at the Calgary Homeless Foundation or conversations with the city to say, where's the greatest need right now? Is there program funding to support it? And then it's done through an RFP process.
Great, thank you so much. Sarah, a question for you regarding lessons learned with the joint shared application process with CMHC. For other municipalities seeking to explore this model, or for nonprofits that are seeking to encourage their municipalities to explore this, what are the top, what are the barriers that you encountered, and how would you go about doing this to work for both entities?
So I know this question is for me, but I bet Bernadette might also have an answer.
Okay.
I'll start it off. It's certainly for the government entities that are on the line, it is a challenge to launch an affordable housing program within your own government in terms of getting council approval, administration buy-in, and being able to launch that on its own. When we talk about trying to also align the interests of other government, it's very hard because we're now talking about more entities that we're involving. I think one of the challenges is the timing around elections and red zones has been a challenge because we almost always have one government in an election or a red zone period, and the program timing doesn't always line up. And so it's something that I would say to be acknowledge and to appreciate and understand that does impact when you could release even properties. I think the other thing is it really does require some early conversations on interests. And one of the things for us at the city is we understand that Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation has national criteria. And so what we tried to do is align the municipal criteria as closely as possible with the federal criteria. They may not necessarily be what Calgary would choose for a program based on specific local needs. But one of the things that's for sure that happens anyways when we don't align is that it's pretty hard for a nonprofit to put a deal together with very different income criteria and rental rate criteria for 3 levels of government. I know as a provider, I can see this challenge. So I think being able to understand what you could be flexible on and what you can't in the early conversation is probably really helpful. And just to be realistic about that. The piece that I thought Bernadette might want to comment on is agreements. I think because this is the first time we had this experience, and we were trying to make it as easy for the nonprofits as possible. But of course, all governments are worried about risk. Is the investment going to have the public benefit? And so I think we had 6 agreements for the first land sale in terms of pre-construction, post-construction, financing, all of this. And we really worked with CMHC to make sure that we understood what would happen in case of a default, but also trying to make it possible the nonprofit could leverage land, which was, the goal of the program. So not too much encumbrances. And so I think for the nonprofits that have been involved so far, it's been a bit of a learning process, and we're still on a journey trying to improve that, trying to manage risk, government risk, public interest, with that goal of still making it, getting rid of red tape as much as we can to make it less burdensome.
Great. Thank you. I'm just going to add a note. Carol Ann added an answer just saying, as a housing solution consultant for CMHC, meeting with all parties at the beginning of the project to align that project is a really important piece, so similar to what you said before. One question for Chelsea. Chelsea, other nonprofit housing providers often talk about, social enterprise and creating employment opportunities for the clients that they serve. Can you talk a little bit about how you might suggest someone would go? What are the key tips or lessons around looking at a construction company that provides employment to people with barriers?
Yeah, thanks so much. I think it's really important to think about social enterprise as a tool to the mandate. So, it's interesting. I come from, all my past experience has been in before I started with Choices a number of years ago, was in entrepreneurship in, SMEs or small to medium-sized businesses. And, I remember coming into this work and it being very much about, well, how do we make the business work and the social side work, but ne'er the two shall meet? And that was, I think, the thing I would, if anybody's looking to start a social enterprise that involves the employment of a vulnerable or marginalized population, you have to think about it not in that traditional, like the programmatic stuff gets in the way of the business and the business stuff gets in the way of the program. You need to think about it like, how might we run a social purpose business that has those values that show up on the social side of the work we do in everything we do. It is not, there's a reason why we don't necessarily just, provide labor for large construction companies, although we do some of that. We prioritize the values-based business opportunities, which is the things like building affordable housing, because that connects with the values of the organization and it also achieves their social mandate. I also think one of the things you want to think about through as well is to do that, you need a hybrid of such. You need some funding to help you with the programmatic components and ensure you have the support models in place. In order for you to do the business work. And so, when people say, well, you need to have a sustainable business, I 100% agree with that. But to run that effective social enterprises that achieves those social outcomes and does good work in the marketplace, you need to have some sort of funding to help ground that programmatic component.
Great, thank you so much. And then I think we have time for one more question that we have here, and I'm thinking this could be targeted to all three panelists perhaps, but what advice can you provide on how to manage the community? And I'm thinking the community consultation process or community response to affordable housing and permanent supported housing. What strategies have worked in your experience? Maybe Bernadette could start.
Sure, I'll jump in on that. So we're very, I think that for me, the biggest piece of advice we can be is be proactive, be transparent. So the day that we get a piece of land under contract, we send emails to MLAs, councillors, all of elected officials, community associations, BRZs, kind of all of the key parties there. We then do door knocking within a certain block radius, mail outs, letting everybody know what we're doing and who we are, and then we have an open house. And then I think, so that's kind of on the upfront, and then as we get closer to opening, we do door knocking again in partnership with our agency. But I think for us, one of the biggest things is, I think I mentioned in my presentation, is being present with the agency partner with any issues, because when you're going into a new community for consultation, they'll often reach out to other community associations. So I think if you can really be committed to the community work, then that enhances your reputation as an organization. And I think that goes a long way.
Great, thank you. Sarah, Chelsea, do you have anything else to add there?
I think this is a hard topic for a lot of communities. I think for us, it starts with a strong strategy that has political buy-in from City Council. The program that I spoke about has strong buy-in in principle. So when it comes to bringing forward a piece of land that's specifically in someone's ward, we already have council commitment to have affordable housing in all neighborhoods in Calgary, and 50% of neighborhoods do not have affordable housing currently. That just has to do with our growth patterns and how policy supported affordable housing in the past. And so the other piece is having good neighbor policies and listening to the community when you go in and being able to address concerns. And I think Bernadette touched on it. We have a few developments that were difficult. We have many neighborhoods who have been embracing from the beginning the affordable housing, and the day that we open, they're signing community association memberships for free and working with the new residents on community engagement and welcoming. We've also had some that have been tough, and most of the ones that are tough at the beginning actually end up being successful at the opening or soon after the opening. And being able to leverage that experience with the community and have them speak at the next opening really helps. And the other thing is we have the Community Housing Affordability Collective, which is a network of providers both in the development industry, rental housing industry, and nonprofits, and all working together towards affordable housing. And that provides a positive voice and support when applications are coming forward as well. So having that strong network in the community also helps if there are isolated pockets of people really not wanting a specific development. It's very helpful.
That's great. Thank you so much to all the panelists. I'll hand it back to Dominica to close out, I guess.
Sure, yeah, thank you. And I echo what Irene said. We can definitely be speaking, I think, for at least another half hour or hour on all of these topics. That's where Congress comes in handy, because after the sessions, you know, you get together with the speakers and panelists and have conversations and network. So that's definitely a piece that we're all missing in the sector. So thank you, and that's all the time that we have for today's webinar. Thank you to Bernadette, Chelsea, Sarah, and Irene, and everyone who joined us for today's webinar and stayed till the end. You will receive an email with a survey about today's webinar in about an hour, and just to let you know, your responses help to inform future programming, and so we thank you for that. Today's webinar recording, as well as a PDF version of the presentations, will also be shared on CHRA's website in the next couple of days. So again, thank you everyone. Take care and definitely stay safe. Thank you so much.